whatever you call it. Basically, Nintendo has announced a new Nintendo Switch OLED. They're just replacing the screen with an OLED 7-inch, so it's a larger screen. Doesn't use any more power than the last model did, and gives you brighter, more vibrant, and accurate picture. So for those who like to game on the go, it's a big deal. But the big thing that people have been trying to get some sort of answer on is whether or not they've been able to address the controller drift issue. The controller drift issue basically is an issue that pops up, especially with these like really compact joysticks. The way they work is there's usually like the actual physical joystick, a sleeve around it, and that sleeve actuates X and Y coordinate movements on it to translate into controller movement. And it usually does it by reading two of the sensors at the same time. That'll give you movement information. So if I guess if you think about it as like cardinal directions on a compass, if you up, north, and like left, west was being pressed at the same time, you'd be moving in a diagonal to like the northwest or up, left, whatever. But that's how they work. Most of them have always been using some sort of plastic sheathing that are these like tiny actuators that move up and down. And as they get used over time, basically the plastic starts to grind down, creates like dust. And these are relatively sealed systems that the dust is collecting in. And as that happens, it starts messing with the way the sensors read the positions of the actuators that it's trying to read to figure out the position of the joystick. It's been a pervasive issue. People who get a lot of use out of their Switch controllers, or even like the handheld one, Switch Lite, they've all exhibited issues. And it's not just Nintendo products either. The issue has been seen in PlayStation controllers, Xbox controllers, and there's good reason to believe that the PlayStation 5 joysticks will also at some point run into this problem as well. Because it largely affects all Nintendo products or all Nintendo Switch products, they've been hit with currently, I think there's 3 active lawsuits that are looking at trying to find some sort of legal win for the consumer. Whether it's right or not wrong, it's not really for us to comment on. Also, how pervasive the issue is may or may not be as big as a deal as people claim it to be. I think the biggest issue is people who get a lot of mileage out of their Switch are likely to run into it. And especially if you have the Switch Lite, you can't swap out Joy-Cons. You are kind of stuck with the unit itself. And if you start running into accuracy issues with the joysticks, it can be a real problem. The way it sort of exhibits itself in games is basically it's almost as if you're getting like a phantom press of the joystick. Like, so you let go of it, the joystick, and returns to center neutral position, which should be reading a 0 and not any sort of movement information, but you'll get like slow movement to one direction or another. So it can be really annoying. Not a lot of people enjoy having it when it happens, but it has led to 3 lawsuits that Nintendo is now trying to combat. So as the OLED model was announced, people rightfully are interested to find out if the Joy-Con drift issue has actually been addressed. And Nintendo's been really cagey about it. Basically, they left like a press release announcement, and to quote it directly, their official statement is the joysticks or the components of the Switch are the same as the controllers currently available. And people are saying, "Oh, this is an indictment." This is definitely Nintendo saying that they haven't done anything to address it, and it's going to cause the same problems it has in the past. But the thing is that they're currently in 3 lawsuits, which prevents them to talk about anything. More than anything else, they can't indict themselves. If they were to say anything that was to confirm that there is known issues, that there are issues, or Nintendo acknowledges these as some sort of ongoing problem, that would be fodder for these lawsuits, and they'd likely lose or lead to a class action lawsuit that could, cost Nintendo millions of dollars in replacements and repairs. Nintendo doesn't want this. Nintendo wants the problem to be resolved on a case-by-case basis. If you have a controller with a Joy-Con that's, exhibiting drift issues, they want you to just send it in. They'll replace it in most cases, at least in the US and I think Western Europe. So Nintendo will not say that anything has changed and that there is a problem because of the legal suits that they're in. So does this mean that Nintendo hasn't addressed it? And basically, I think it falls two ways, right? In order for them to get a new supplier for that joystick, which has been consistent with all of their Joy-Cons, or Joy-Cons and Switch devices, they may have to re-engineer things. It's not that uncommon that you would swap out parts, but something as sensitive as a controller module that has to fit the form factor of what is currently there may prove to be more difficult. And finding a part provider that can meet the expectations of the last provider or exceed it, especially, may be extremely difficult. There's good reason to believe that Nintendo wouldn't address it at all. And if it's not as pervasive and maybe it's only affecting 3 to 5% of Switch owners, then they'll just stomach the cost, get the replacement parts in, and just say nothing about it. It's, if you have a problem, they'll replace it. Done. Everybody else who doesn't exhibit the problem, they won't replace it, and they don't have to do a manual recall or a forced recall. So there's good reason to believe it just is the same part, and there's not really a reason for them to spend a lot of money in R&D on getting a brand new joystick in the device. The Joy-Cons, as we know, for the OLED model are exactly the same as the Joy-Cons in the past model, and the component parts in the Joy-Cons are the same things that go into the Switch Lite. So they're not really looking to get a new supplier anytime soon or re-engineer for any reason. And for that reason, it's likely that there has not been a hardware change. However, if it is a big enough problem and they went and sought out getting replacement and have spent the last year or two finding some sort of replacement for the whole thing, they still wouldn't say anything about it because they cannot accept culpability. And for that reason, it may just be a wait and see. It has to get into people's hands and where they'll be able to do a tear down and maybe see if there's been component changes. So basically it comes down to is we don't really know. In all likelihood, it is not a brand new OLED, or excuse me, a brand new analog joystick module, and the drift issue will continue to be an issue through the life of that product.